Alright, do I have an Abu Dujana or an Dujana today? Do I have an Abu Dujana or an Dujana? Dujana. Here we go. So, I mentioned this in another class, I believe. So, Abu Dujana was one of the companions who, during one of the battles, the Prophet ﷺ, he picked up a sword and he said, who's going to take this sword? Who's going to take the responsibility of this sword? And everyone got scared because they realized that there's a big responsibility if the Prophet ﷺ is saying that. So then Abu Dujana, people asked the question. Abu Dujana was ready, and somebody asked the question, what is the responsibility of that sword? And he explained the responsibility is to use it as much as possible, even if your life is going to be on the line. Abu Dujana said, I'm ready. So he was the first one and the only one who grabbed it, and then he started walking around like a little bit kind of like happy that he got the honor and everything. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, he said, this way of walking is despised in Islam, except in this circumstance. So Abu Dujana is known as the guy who, as soon as there's a volunteer, like an opportunity to volunteer, he's the one who jumps on the opportunity. That's why we said whoever takes the pointer, they're Abu Dujana or Dujana. Alhamdulillah. Alright. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, wa ba'd. So we'll begin with Thumama. Thumama was one of the chiefs of Al-Yamama. Al-Yamama is in the Najd area. So he received, in the 6th year after Hijrah, he received the letter that was sent out by the Prophet, peace be upon him, to call him to Islam. And remember, the Prophet sent out letters to different leaders in the area, or actually not in the area, all around. So he was one of the people who received a letter, and he was furious when he read the letter. Not only was he furious, but he actually wanted and intended to go and kill the Prophet. So he was really, really upset. He's one of those people who felt like their pride is injured by being called to Islam. It's like, how dare you, how dare you even make this suggestion that I would leave up my religion and I would, join you guys or, obey you or follow you. So what happened was, he was so upset with Islam and so upset with the Prophet and the Muslims that one time he met some of the companions who were traveling through his region, and he went and he killed them. So he started killing the companions, which is like a declaration of war with the Muslims. It's something that you don't do. So after this, you can imagine how bad the situation is between Thumama and between the Muslim Ummah, between the Muslim community. So one time, Thumama was actually on a journey, and obviously the fact that he had killed some of the companions, Muslims were patrolling the regions for enemies who might be traveling through their territory. And this is one of the things you have to keep in mind. So whenever you're reading something about, well, why is the Prophet sending out small little armies around the region in Medina when this is what year? This is the year 6 after Hijrah. There's peace or there's no peace with Quraysh? There's peace with Quraysh. So what is he doing? Well, once the peace is signed, why do you got to have all military expedition? Just put down all the weapons and all the swords and everything's going to be nice and we just have a treaty. Well, why would he do something like this? Huh? Yeah, people other than the Quraysh have not made a peace treaty with him. Like Thumama killing his companions. Right? So you may have a peace treaty with the Quraysh in Mecca, but not necessarily with all the other tribes around Arabia. So there's still a lot of war taking place. They're still in a state of war, just not with the Quraysh. Right? So what's happening here is the Prophet is intelligent. He's making sure we don't want to put ourselves in a difficult situation. So he would send out little battalions and little groups of soldiers to monitor the area in case there's any enemies to Islam who have not made any peace treaty with the Muslims, to make sure that they don't cause any mischief. So somebody noticed Thumama was traveling and they didn't know who he was. So they figured this is a person who does not have a peace treaty. So just to be on the safe side, we're going to go ahead and bring him into Medina. So they captured him, they tied him up, and they brought him into Medina. So what did they do? They tied him to a column inside the masjid. So the masjid has pillars, right? So one of the places where they would tie up some of the prisoners was inside the masjid actually, which shows you something interesting, right? The masjid was used for so many different things. People would wrestle inside the masjid, they would do poetry inside the masjid, there would be prayer inside the masjid. The masjid had so many functions. One of the functions was even as a prison. So literally the prisoner was tied up inside the masjid. Now you can think about the wisdom behind that. Why would you tie up a prisoner inside the masjid? Why not in like a less public place? Why not in a place where they're isolated? Like, what is prison, right? Prison is like an isolated place. No one can see you. You can't see anyone. Solitary confinement. The Prophet, peace be upon him, is doing the exact opposite. He's putting a prisoner inside the masjid in public. Why would he do something like that? One, to expose them to Islam. What else? Okay, perhaps if they try to escape, there's people watching them. What else?
Maybe unlike our current system, they had a means of rehabilitation by listening to the wisdom.
There you go. So like that, there's a means of rehabilitation by listening to the Quran, watching the prayers, listening to the Prophet, and not only that, other way around, the companions get to talk to the prisoner. So now you have human interaction on a regular basis. So what is that going to do? It's going to affect you. People can come and talk, rather than isolation where you start going crazy and you become crazier than you were when you went inside. It's the opposite, right? You can talk to people. People can see you. You can see them. So this was one of the wisdoms of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So he tied him up in the mosque. And when the Prophet, peace be upon him, walked by, right, he saw him and he recognized, this is Thumama, this is the leader of one of the people in Yamama, or one of the groups in Yamama, and this is the guy who killed our companions. So what did the Prophet, peace upon him, do? First thing he did before he even approached him, he sent him some food from his own home. So he asked his family, make some food and send it over to him. And he said, take his camel that we captured him on, milk the camel and give him some of the milk from his own camel. Right? So like this is this is considered top class food basically that you get. So you get a really, really nice meal. You're being well taken care of. Then he went to him and he asked him, he said, what do you have to say for yourself? You killed the companions. You rejected my letter. What do you have to say for yourself? So Thumama responded and he said, listen, if you're going to kill me in retaliation for what I did to your companions, then you will be killing a noble man. So this is the thing about Arabs at that time. I'm not trying to generalize, but the thing about Arabs was their pride was really important to them. So they have to throw that statement in there first, right? So, if you did kill me, you would be killing one of the best people ever. Just want to throw that one out there. But then he didn't stop, and then he continued and he said, but if you want to forgive me, right? And then obviously implied in there is, because I'm such a noble person, if you want to forgive me, then I'm going to be very grateful. Now, what does grateful mean if you're a noble person? Not just money. I will get you, there will be a favor. There will be a special favor for you in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's money or you need me in the future for anything, I owe you a big favor and I'm not going to forget that debt. So he's basically trying to negotiate and saying, if you forgive me, I'm a noble person, don't worry, you'll be taken care of. And then he said, but if you don't just want a favor, if you want money in compensation, I will give you whatever amount you ask. Because he's a very powerful person. He could raise up all that money if he needed to. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, he left him. He left him and he came back after 2 days and he kept on sending him food. Personally from his own family, and he kept on sending the milk and the guys, getting all this food. And he went back and he told the person, he offered him, what do you have to say for yourself? He received the same response. So the same response from him. He came back the next day and he said, what do are you going to consider Islam? Do you realize the mistake that you're making? He received the same response from Thumama again. So what did the Prophet, peace be upon him, do? He set him free. He let him go. Now the question is, why did he let him go? After he had killed some companions, right? After, him sitting in the masjid, he's not inclining towards making any change or anything like that. Why would he let him go, whereas he treats different people in different ways? This is a question that we always need to ask ourselves, because the Prophet, peace be upon him, didn't explain why he let some people go, and why he was soft with some people, why he was harsher with some people. So we need to read into why he might have done something like that, because he didn't clarify his motives. Yeah, Yusuf. So maybe so Yusuf is saying that maybe the circumstance now, because this is after the peace of Hudaybiyah, maybe because they're in a circumstance of peace rather than war, at least with Quraysh and other allies, that he'll apply this across the board even to somebody like Thumama. So that's an option. That's a good supposition. Yeah. Prior to him being captured. Right. That's the question now. So why let him go now? Mm-hmm. Hmm. He could foresee it in his character. Okay. So these are two very good suppositions. So Ali said either he must have received revelation that this person is going to accept Islam, so he let him go, knowing that he was going to accept Islam. So that's one option. The second option is that he probably read his character so well that he knew there's some goodness in him. Let's let him go, and he'll probably be more inclined towards Islam. Both of these are very good options. They're very good guesses. And these are kind of the same way that Muslim scholars interpret it. One group interprets it one way, another group interprets it the other way. So you encompass both of them. But Yusuf also has a good point. So it could be something to do also, perhaps with the peace treaty, also mixing with all of that. So the reality is we can never know for sure. But what we do know is that if it was revelation, then there's not much of a lesson for us, because we're not going to receive revelation. But if it is judging the person's character, then that means that we can actually apply this in our own lives. That if we see somebody looks like they're noble, they're not going to try to fight Muslims afterwards because of the fact that they've been captured and now they've seen a difference after observing the prayer and everything, then letting them go is an option, because it might soften their heart and potentially bring them closer to Islam. So we can actually act upon something like that, especially in a time of peace. So this is what he did. He let him go, and while Thumama was actually traveling away and he was leaving Medina on his way out, and he saw that, you know what, I'm really free. They actually let me go, and they didn't do anything to me. He immediately turned around, came back into the masjid, and he declared his Islam. Right. So this is, shows you that it really affected him. These days of being tied up and watching the Muslims and being served excellent food and good treatment and everything, it had affected him, but it just required that extra step of, let's not pressure him, let the person go on his way, and that was sufficient for him. He came back, so he already had Islam in his heart. By the end, he just didn't want to declare on the spot. So he accepted Islam. Then he came to the Prophet, and when he declared his Islam, he said to the Prophet, there wasn't a face on earth that was more detestable to me than your face. And he said, now your face is the dearest face in the world to me. Question is, how did that happen? Why did that happen? From detestable to loving face. He saw the goodness of the Muslims and the goodness of the Prophet, right? So when he first got the message and he first got the letter, he couldn't read the goodness in that letter because he had other ideas coming in his mind. He already had a preconceived notion about who the Muslims were and what the message is and all of that. And his arrogance and his pride was getting in the way. And now he got broken down. So this is something important that we learn. And then he told the Prophet, he said, I've killed some of your men. So he's concerned now. He says, look, I killed some of your people now. What's going to happen to me? Either am I going to be held accountable in front of Allah? Am I going to be held accountable by you? Or is there going to be some punishment or something like that? And that's when the Prophet, peace be upon him, responded that when you become a Muslim, it obliterates all your past deeds and it marks a new beginning for you. So you're clean slate. You don't need to worry about any of these things in the past. So this is the thing that, a lot of new Muslims, they struggle with, because once they change their life and they enter into Islam, that when they're really sincere, and many of them tend to be very sincere, they're very concerned about all the bad things that they've done in the past. And the key to remember is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wipes all of that out, because they didn't know any better, because they didn't have that guidance and they never accepted that guidance in the first place. So this is a very important thing to remind everyone about, that these things are in the past. You don't dwell over them, but you learn lessons from what you've done in the past so that you don't ever make the same mistake in the future. So it's not like whatever I did, I don't need to learn any. You learn lessons, but you don't regret and start thinking, why did I do that? Am I going to be held accountable? That's going to be wiped out. Yeah. So Thumama, when he was on his way, when he got captured, he'd actually vowed to perform Umrah. Now Umrah is the minor pilgrimage where there's Hajj, the major pilgrimage, where you go, a certain time of the year to Mecca. And then there's Umrah, when you go outside of the normal season of Hajj time. So that's called Umrah, when you go and visit Mecca and you go around the Kaaba. This is considered to be Umrah. So he had vowed to perform Umrah. So he was on his way to Mecca and he was going to go and perform that. So he asked the Prophet, what should I do? The Prophet said, go and fulfill your vow. Because you're still supposed to, the Kaaba is still built by Prophet Ibrahim. So he said, even though you're a Muslim, even though there's idols there, go and perform the pilgrimage anyways. So he went, and now that he's a Muslim, he learned that there's some different changes that you have to make as a Muslim in the way that he used to perform Umrah before when he was not a Muslim, and the way that a Muslim is going to perform the Umrah. So he was the first Muslim actually to go and perform the Umrah according to the proper Islamic formula, who is actually going to be there and gets to perform the Umrah. Not just Tawaf, but Umrah. So Tawaf would have been who probably? Who performed Tawaf prior to him among the Muslims? When? No, outside of that, after the migration. Did anyone perform? Did anyone get an opportunity to perform the Umrah? Umrah when? Yeah. Okay, that's true. The Muslims in Mecca. How about anyone from Medina? Did they get an opportunity? What about during the Treaty of Hudaybiyah? Uthman. Right, so they gave him the opportunity, but did he take the opportunity? He didn't want to do it without the Prophet. So he was given the opportunity, but he didn't take it. So technically, Thumama is the first one to actually go and perform the Umrah, or go and perform the Tawaf, among the people who were outside of Mecca as a Muslim, the way the Prophet taught him. So when he went there, right, now the Quraysh hear him performing Umrah, performing the circling the Kaaba, and they didn't know that he's Muslim until now. So what did he do? He raised up his voice and he started saying, Labbaik Allahumma labbaik, which means, here I am, O Allah, I'm at your service, which is normal. But then when he said, La sharika laka labbaik. So he said, La sharika lak means you have no partner. So this is part of the chanting that we do during the pilgrimage. But this was not something that the pagan Arabs used to say, because they believe in partners for Allah. So the difference is, when he started chanting this and saying it very loudly, they realized this guy's become a Muslim. And obviously they're really upset. Now that there's a Muslim sitting in Mecca and he's going around, and how could this happen? So they stopped him. And they like were about to go and attack him. They say, "What do you think you're doing? How did a Muslim get over here?" And then they realized who he was. This is not some just normal guy who accepted Islam. See, when you accept Islam and you had a status among people, it makes a world of difference because people will respect that status. You have power. So they realized this is Thumama coming from Yamama, coming from the area of Najd, and the supplies of Quraysh are a lot of their supplies and food is actually coming from that region. So what's the problem in Mecca? The problem in Mecca, what kind of terrain is Mecca? Barren, mountainous, right? It's a barren valley, right? Or it was a valley until they started bulldozing all the hills. But I mean, it used to be a valley at least. So now what happens? You have Mecca needs imports in order for it to survive. So all its food, all of its other resources are coming from outside. That's why all the Meccans were what? Mainly by profession. Businessmen, right? They're traders. Why? Whereas the people of Medina were what? They were farmers because there's farmland. It's a more verdant land. So this is dangerous for them because if their supplies and all their goods are coming in from the area where Thumama is coming from and he's in charge of this, they're like, whoa, if we beat this guy up, what's going to happen? We're going to be in trouble because our supplies are going to be cut off. So they stopped and they kind of went back a little bit, and then they started trying to convince him to come back to his pagan religion. So they're like, how could you, accept Islam? You left the religion of your forefathers. This was considered to be like the worst insult that an Arab can make against somebody else. The way to convince them is, how could you abandon what your ancestors have done? Today, what would the parallel of today be? Because it's in today's society, if you say you've left what your parents have done, you're considered to be, oh, well then you're a free spirit and you're liberated from the shackles and the cultural imitation of your parents. So what do people use today to kind of what is seen as like an enlightened person, kind of similar to making an accusation that you've left the religion of your parents? Because today, if you say that, just imagine you go to an average person, you say, you left the religion of your parents. People are like, awesome, it's great. It shows you that you didn't blindly follow them. But what about today? What has changed? Okay. Yeah, but okay, imagine an accusation, right? Imagine you were to go up to someone and you were going to make an accusation against someone. What would be the most powerful accusation that it would really hurt them? Like, man, like everyone around them would be like, wow, I can't believe this guy did that. He went against something. Betrayed his country? Maybe if you're in America. If you're living in like Alabama or something like that, yeah, I can see that. But still, we're not like, what's that? What? Yorba Linda. It's funny you mentioned that. I just had a meeting with the chief of police today. So anyways, yeah. Huh? I mean, okay. Look, think about our community, right? If somebody came and all of a sudden they walked up, imagine a college kid or someone like that, and you go, someone has done something bad, and you're like, you've gone against what everyone else is doing in college. Will that really affect them? It's not.
No, but on the other side, if someone doesn't drink, he doesn't fit in. So many of the kids, they drink just to fit in, right? So maybe that's the opposite of it is very.
Okay, I can see that, but still, it's not as powerful. What's more powerful? Oh yeah, okay, yeah. In ethnic communities, you betrayed your people, so that's kind of more than nationalism. That could be it. Perhaps what's stronger than that in my opinion, at least. Align with the terror? No, something else. Yeah, but what does changing your beliefs have to do with racism? Something about changing your beliefs. No, that's. Let me clarify. Okay. At that time, one of the strong proofs for why they follow what they follow was because the ancestors followed it. Right? So if you go away from that, you've left one of the strong proofs for them in society. Everyone sees following the ancestors and the forefathers as being a strong proof. What in this society is considered a strong proof for leaving or following something? Science and rationality, right? So if you do something which is quote unquote, you've done something unscientific, or you've done something that's not in line with reason, then that's where you're going to be attacked, right? So that's how things have changed now, right? So that's what people are accused of when if they follow something and they say, oh, well, this is against science, or this is against reason, or, enlightenment, or whatever it is. So things change in every society. So this is the way it used to be at that time. So they tried to accuse him, and they tried to get to him and say, you know what? How could you leave the religion of your forefathers? This is so ridiculous. This is so bad how you've done something like this. So he doesn't want to hear this argument because he's already 100% convinced of Islam is truth. So now he's a zealous new Muslim, and he's going to go all out and do everything for Islam. So what does he do? He vows, he says, you know what? You're not going to get any grain, any wheat, you're not going to get any supplies because of the way you still have hostility towards Islam and Muslims. Even though during a peace treaty, you're not getting any supplies from this region, we're going to cut you off completely. That's his love for this is his understanding of how to serve Islam. So what happened was this boycott affected the Quraysh so greatly that there was like a famine going on because they weren't getting enough supplies. It was very, very difficult for them. So what did the Quraysh do? They wrote a letter to the Prophet, peace be upon him. Imagine after all this hostility, after all these years of torture and everything, now they write him a letter and they say, look, we have a peace treaty between us, and our people are dying of hunger. Exaggeration, right? Our people are dying of hunger. We don't have enough supplies. So please stop this guy over there, because he's not part of the treaty. Stop this guy over there who's a new Muslim, from this boycott, and get us some supplies. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, imagine, what would you do if you were in his situation? There are people who they have a grudge against a family member for 30 years and they'll never forgive them, no matter what happens. Just look at the Prophet, peace be upon him. After all this, he does not have to agree to this because this group is outside of their immediate peace treaty. He can say, you know what, that's your problem. That's not my problem. He's a Muslim, he can do whatever he wants and secretly, weaken the Quraysh that way. But he didn't want to do that. Right? It shows you the mercy of the Prophet. So what does he do? He sends a letter to Thumama and he says, lift the boycott. It's becoming very difficult for them. Give them their food and their supplies and all of that they need. So he lifted the boycott. Right? So this is the passion of Thumama that he wanted, and also the obedience of him. So when the Prophet told him stop, he stopped immediately. So after the Prophet, peace be upon him, Thumama, remember, he's living in which area? But what particular region? Yamama. So we talk so many times about the Battle of Yamama. Who came from Yamama? Musaylama, right? So Musaylama, later on after the Prophet, when Musaylama claimed prophethood and all of that, Thumama was not one of the people who was swayed by him. Many people were swayed by him. Why? Because they were from the same tribe. They were from the same people. And if you remember that quote, one person, he said that, you know what, I know the Prophet Muhammad is a true prophet, but at the same time, Musaylama is from our people and he's from a different tribe. Therefore, I'd rather follow the prophet or the false prophet from our tribe rather than the true prophet from somebody else's tribe. So the tribalism was a major factor in Musaylama's success in recruiting people. So this is Thumama. We're seeing small snippets of companions who we only have a little bit information about them throughout history. So we're going to see these snippets, inshallah. Any questions about Thumama? No.
Was he the companion that when he converted, the Prophet said,
Was it Thumama? I don't remember.
No,
The 7 stomachs, yeah. I don't recall, to be honest with you. But, we should look it up. Look it up, let me know, inshallah. We can add all of this. Um, did I tell you what my plan was for next time we teach this class? So one is to go through the entire, more like the whole biography of the person, and then have the famous quotes that they have said in history, and also some of the main hadith that they've narrated, to contextualize those hadith with the life of the person. Actually, I did mention it in one of the classes. But that's the goal. It's a big goal, of course. So once you graduate, you can all help me, inshallah, to develop that in the future. All right. Any other questions about Thumama? All right. Zayd al-Khair. So remember, we've learned about quite a few. We've seen Zayd before, right? So how many Zayds have we learned about? Zayd ibn Thabit. Zayd ibn Haritha. Huh? Sa'id ibn Zayd. Right. So we've seen a few Zayds. This is Zayd al-Khair. Right, so al-Khair means the good. So we're going to see where he got his name and why he got his name. So Zayd was actually an excellent horseman. He was a great archer. And the story in your book talks about how one time a person held out a rope which had 3 knots in it. And he took an arrow and he shot each and every single one of the 3 knots from a far distance. So it shows you he's a really, really good archer. That's why he was known as Zayd al-Khayl. Not Khair, but Khayl with a lam, which means Zayd of the horses. So Khayl are basically horses. So it means that when you nickname somebody after a horse or after a dog or after an animal, a camel or something like that, it means that he has some association with that animal in his daily life. So Zayd al-Khayl was a really good horseman. He knew how to ride a horse. And remember, a horse was the most important animal in like military activity, because it's really, really fast. You can maneuver it much better than other animals. So he became known as Zayd al-Khayl. So he was actually very generous, and he was known, for his honorable reputation among people. So they were honorable people, and the Arabs would generally recognize these people. Mainly, they would praise people who were either poets, or people who were strong warriors, or people who were generally noble and generous with their wealth and their welcoming people in terms of hospitality. So if you remember the first day of Islamic History 101, which you probably don't, but if you do, there's certain characteristics that Arabs had that they held in high esteem. Among those characteristics were generosity, hospitality, strength, right, as a warrior, in poetry. So all of these characteristics that they had, they would hold these people in honor in particular. So Zayd was one of those people who was held in honor by the Arabs at the time. So Zayd went with a group of some friends to Medina in order to see the Prophet, to find out more about him. Who is this guy claiming to be a prophet and all of that? And this is after he had arrived in Medina. So when they came into the masjid, they actually entered during the time when the Prophet, peace be upon him, was giving a lecture. So they started listening to the lecture, and they were so impressed by the lecture, or Zayd himself was so impressed by the lecture, he accepted Islam on the spot. So, you said what? Astaghfirullah. Why? Okay, alhamdulillah. So he accepted Islam on the spot, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, on the spot, he renamed him to Zayd al-Khair. Instead of Zayd al-Khayl, Khair means good. So he renamed him Zayd the good, or Zayd of goodness, rather than Zayd of horses. Now, why would he do something like that? You see, you're only required to change your name if your name has a bad meaning. So when someone's name was Abd al-Shams, they changed his name, the servant of the sun, or slave of the sun, they had to change his name to Abdullah. That's understandable. Now this guy's name is Zayd al-Khayl, Zayd of the horses. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with that name. So why change his name? No, you were the only one who raised their hand. Yeah, so.
I would say because since this guy is so well known and people look up to him, if they found out that his name changed, they would inquire about it and they would be like, oh, he's a Muslim now, I want to be a Muslim too.
Okay. So Ali is saying that he was so well known, when they change his name, people are going to want to know why his name changed. So they'll learn more about Islam. So he's got the dawah mentality, going. Okay, that's potential. What else? Any other? That's a good point, but you didn't raise your hand. But that's okay. so, so he might have khair, he might have goodness in paradise. Okay.
Mainly because all the memories and the things that comes with faith is from his jahiliyyah, so you want to give him a new name that kind of take him to a new era.
Right. So maybe because all the khayl is associated with him being a warrior, and at that time they used to raid caravans and do some other things. So it kind of is a new transition for him now, that he's now moving into a different phase of his life, so he can focus on the goodness rather than maybe some of the bad stuff that he used to do. So these are all good guesses, right? And this is most probably, I would agree with you. This is probably the reason why he changed his name. And not only that, this is something that is a special honor for the person. This is an honorable person. So when the Prophet is changing somebody's name, it's like the Prophet gave you special attention. And he said, you know what, this would be a great name for you, something like that. So this is what they did. And you notice that the word khair and khayl are close to each other, right? So this is what a lot of new Muslims do as well. They do the same thing. So whenever someone's name was David, he changed his name to Dawood. Or you find that people, they take their previous name and they change it to something that rhymes in Arabic with the exact same name. So where do they get that idea from? It's just something made up? No, it's something that has a historical basis in terms of when they want to do it. Right? So the Prophet renamed him to Zayd al-Khair, and then he took him to his own home. So again, I keep highlighting this lesson. Not someone becomes a new Muslim, we say, Allahu Akbar. They say, okay, we'll see you next week, and then you don't see them next week, and then they're gone. What happened to them? No one followed up with them, or something like that. The Prophet immediately took him directly to his own home, which is a great honor and respect. And what did he do when he brought him in the home? He handed him a cushion. And he said, why don't you relax on this cushion? Remember, this is a very simple society. They used to sit on the floor all the time. If you're not used to sitting on the floor, you know how uncomfortable it can be, right? So one of the things is there's a little cushion. Some of you are probably familiar with this. It's a little type of cushion where you just put it on there and you can actually just lean on it, and it's extremely comfortable. But if you don't have that cushion, it's not comfortable at all. All your body weight has to be, kept by yourself, right? So the thing is, in this case, he tried to make him as comfortable as possible. So the Prophet peace be upon him handed him a cushion, said, relax, enjoy, have a night, sit on like a sofa type environment and feel comfortable. So what did Zayd do? He refused the cushion. He said, no, Messenger, I'm not going to take it. He gave it back to him. So the Prophet ﷺ, he gave it back and he insisted, no, I want you to take that cushion. I want you to relax. And he gave it back. And he insisted again and he gave it back. Now the thing is, why is he not taking the cushion? Why did he keep on resisting? Why would he do something like that? Okay, it is out of respect for the Prophet. Even if there was two, it's considered that if you're leaning in front of somebody, it's considered disrespectful. In the sense that if you had utmost respect, you would sit up with full attention in front of that person. Right? So, just a reflection on culture, how culture has changed. Right? Culture has really, really changed. Like, you were leaning. So, you did not prompt my comment, though. I was going to make it anyways. But now I'll emphasize it more. So, look how culture has changed, right? It's changed very much. The thing is, there's different ways of showing respect that different people have in society. But this is the way it was. This shows you how much love and respect the companions had for the Prophet, peace be upon him. They wanted to show respect even in the smallest of ways. So we can show the same type of respect in other ways, in other aspects. Right? How can we show respect and love for the Prophet, peace be upon him, today? One is follow him. Right? That's the obvious one. Right? I actually follow him. But what else? This is something small, right? This is something that the Prophet would not even be offended in any way, shape, or form if he had leaned on a cushion. So small, right? Other companions may have even leaned on a cushion, but Zayd wanted to make it very clear, I have that special respect for you. There was another companion. How did he show respect to the Prophet? He didn't look at him in the face afterwards. Remember? So there's different ways of manifesting respect. What's one way we can manifest respect? There's no right answer on this.
If you have a paper or something that has a name in comment, you write words somewhere high.
Right. So there's one. So if you have a paper or a book about the seerah or about the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him, or something like that, you put it in a higher position, or you give it some type of special respect or honor or treatment, like we do with the Quran, something like that.
Whenever his name is mentioned, you say sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
That's obvious one as well, right? But yeah, you mention his name, you say peace be upon him, you say sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What else? I mean, I'm just looking for something maybe that you personally would do that other people would not think of, that we can learn from. Be hospitable to your guests. Because he did it, or what? Or in what sense? Right, but that's a general principle from Islam, right? Something specific. If you can think, if not, that's fine. To ask for blessings upon him and his family, yes.
I know a story in the past of this man who would never say the name Muhammad unless he had wudu.
So this is an example. So not say his name unless you had wudu, something like that. That's on a totally another level. That's hard to do, yeah.
I heard like a guy whose name was Muhammad, and whenever he went to like Starbucks, he wouldn't say Muhammad because they would recommend him if you don't want them to drink and try.
Interesting. Interesting. Hmm. Mahmud Ghaznawi, yeah, the king who said that. Okay. So yeah, there's different ways. Keep in mind, he's one of the companions who manifested this self on his own. So if you think of ways to show respect to the Prophet, peace upon him, in your own way, do that. Right? That's what we should be doing. So after that, after accepting Islam, Zayd goes and asks the Prophet, peace be upon him, give me 300 horsemen, and I'm going to go and I'm going to secure the entire area of Byzantine, the Romans. Right? So the Roman Empire is extremely powerful. He's like, look, trust me, I can handle this. Just give me 300 people and I will challenge the Roman Empire. So this is a guy who's really courageous, and the Prophet was so impressed by his boldness. He's like, wow, man, this guy is really, really dedicated. So you can just imagine what this guy would have been in Islam, what he could have done potentially. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not want it to be. So soon after he accepted Islam, he caught a major illness that was affecting some of the people in Medina, and he decided that, you know what, he wants to make his way back to his people before he dies, so he can tell them about Islam and tell them about what he saw. And on the way back, he died. And that's it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed that Zayd, he barely had any time as a Muslim. Now this man had so much potential, he had so much honor and respect in front of people, he was a great horseman, he was a great archer and all of that, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed that he was not going to have any opportunity to do anything with that. So Allah knows best why he does these things and what he could have done and what would have happened to him or anything like that. But this is why we don't know the rest of his story, because there is nothing else to tell in his story. So it's a very interesting, we can always surmise and say, what could have happened? He could have been another Khalid ibn al-Walid. He could have perhaps been even better than him. We don't know. But in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's what matters the most. It's not about the effects in this world. Right? You say it would be nice to have another guy like him. But you know what? As long as in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his deeds are accepted, his intentions are accepted, that's what matters the most. So there are some people who may pass away in front of you and you think they had so much potential, they could have done so much. Allah chose not for them to survive. And He has His own wisdom behind that. Right? So that's Zayd al-Khayr. Any questions about Zayd?
So you think that Allah allowed him to die because Allah saw how sincere
Probably not, because there are other people who are very sincere. No, he didn't say why he died. No. Okay. Abdullah ibn Salam. So Abdullah ibn Salam, his real name was Al-Husayn ibn Salam. And he was actually a well-known rabbi in the city of Yathrib, or around the city of Yathrib. Remember, there was a lot of Jews living in and around Yathrib at the time, Yathrib becoming Medina later on. So he was a well-known rabbi among his people. Now, you may ask, do we find references to Abdullah ibn Salam in the books of the Jews? If we go back and we look, it'd be very interesting to find that in Jewish literature, he's counted as one of the rabbis and the important people among the Jewish community. And the answer is no, we don't find him. So why don't we find him? There's two reasons. There's two potential options, right? Option number one is because he wasn't a rabbi. This is a story that's been made up by Muslims. Option number two is that this information was deliberately erased. So we're going to look at his story and figure out which one of the two is the more probable option. Right? So he heard about the Prophet, peace be upon him, when he was in Mecca still. And the news had reached him, and he started comparing what he has in the revealed books. You know, they did not only follow the Torah, by the way. They had the Torah, and what else did they have? The what? The Talmud, right, which is commentary and Mishnah and all of that. So they had other books, and they had commentaries on those books. So there was a lot of detailed description about all of these things. So what you find is, he starts comparing that this man is claiming to be a prophet. He's in Mecca, he has not met him, but he's analyzing the description, and he's a very knowledgeable rabbi. So he realized that, you know what, this is the prophet that's being mentioned in our books. And even today, they had slightly different book, most probably, than we have today. But even if you analyze today, you still find a lot of verses referring to the prophecy, referring to a prophet that's going to be coming. And then still, if you ask any Jew today, you say, does your book mention that there's a prophecy about a prophet, specifically a prophet that's going to be coming? They say yes. And I've asked rabbis myself. And I said, are you still waiting for him? They said, yes, we're still waiting for him. I said, SubhanAllah. So you do believe that it's there in your book. You believe that there is a prophecy. You just don't believe that the person matched. So this prophecy is still, even in the translations and everything, it's still there. Does anyone know where it is? Very easy place to memorize. Yeah. Deuteronomy 18:18. So you check it. You go and you read, it says that we're going to send a prophet like unto you, speaking to Prophet Musa and explaining exactly the details of what's going to happen. He's going to be revealing, I'm going to reveal my words in his mouth, and he's not going to speak from himself. He's going to speak from my direct revelation. So check Deuteronomy 18:18. It's still there. And there were additional references and details that we don't have in the books anymore. That were probably in their other books. So imagine Abdullah ibn Salam at that time has more description than even Deuteronomy 18:18, which is still quite a lot. And he's convinced that this has to be the prophet that it's talking about. So he was convinced, but what he did was he kept it a secret. Now he's a rabbi. You would expect a rabbi to have authority among the people, right? But when the people are corrupt and your society is corrupt, you may be a great scholar, but you don't have the authority in front of your people. So now it's like they say, one scholar said, he said the tail is wagging the dog rather than vice versa, right? So what happens is when your community doesn't have that respect for knowledge and they become a corrupt society, it doesn't matter how great of a scholar or of a leader you are, they're going to try to control you rather than you having influence over them. So this is what was happening to Abdullah ibn Salam, because there was a lot of corruption among the Jews at the time. So he had to keep it a secret because he was afraid of what's going to happen to himself if he tried to reveal this, right? Because the Prophet is not an Arab. Prophet is an Arab, he's not a Jew. But the ironic thing is, it says in the prophecy, even in Deuteronomy 18:18, it says that he's not going to come from your own lineage, but from your brethren, from the other side of the family of Prophet Ishaq. Right? So the other side of Prophet Moses, the other lineage, which means the side of Ismail, side of Ishmael. Right? So despite that, they didn't get the message. So when the Prophet, peace upon him, arrived in the city of Medina, he went and he visited him. And he heard him, talking about the message of Islam, about greeting people, about sharing food, about praying at night. And he realized this is the man that I've been anticipating, and this is a true prophet. He declared his Islam. When he declared his Islam, the Prophet changed his name to Abdullah, to the servant of Allah, out of respect, because Abdullah is a name which is more powerful in the sense that someone is dedicated completely to Allah. So he chose that respect for him and changed his name. So then Abdullah ibn Salam, he went back to his family. He told his family, explained to them everything, and they all accepted Islam. But he told them to keep it a secret as well. So he was not able to tell all the people at the time. Then he has an idea. He goes to the Prophet and he tells him, look, the Jews among the people, they've become corrupt. They slander a lot, they lie a lot, they defame people. And he says, I know the moment I declare my Islam, they're going to start defaming me, calling me, names, saying that this guy was never knowledgeable, he never had any status, any position among his people, or whatever it is. So he said, I want to prove to you what my status really is among the people before they start saying bad stuff about me. I want you to know who I really am. So you get the real lowdown about who I am. So he has an idea. He says, Prophet, I'm going to hide, and you invite all the prominent Jewish leaders in order to speak with you, and just keep me hidden in the corner and ask them about me and about who I am and my status and everything before telling them anything what happened to me. So the Prophet agrees. He invited the Jews, explained Islam to them, and then they got into a debate and they started arguing with him and everything. And then he said, look, let me ask you a question. What do you think about Al-Husayn ibn Salam? And they started praising him. He's such an honorable man. He's one of our most learned people, and this and that. So the Prophet said, what would you say if he accepted Islam? He said that would never happen. He would never do something like that. So then he called him out, and Abdullah ibn Salam came in front of them, and he started telling them, you people, you know that he's a real prophet of God. You know that this is the man in your books. You need to accept him. And they started cursing him and insulting him and said, you're the son of this and that. And they kept on going. This guy's never been a rabbi. He had no authority. All of a sudden, the whole story changed. The whole story has completely changed. Right? So he knew exactly that this would happen, and this is exactly what happened. So Abdullah ibn Salam accepted Islam, became a true believer, and lived, for quite some time, and participated in a lot of time with the Muslims and with the companions and with the Prophet, peace be upon him. So any questions about Abdullah ibn Salam? We obviously need more biography of him. Yes. He used to teach the other companions as well. Yeah. Yeah, so he actually taught the Israeliyat, the Israelite, stories and traditions and all of that. So that's why the Prophet, peace be upon him, he's actually said, go ahead and narrate from Bani Israel, wala haraj, meaning, and there's no harm in that, right? So you have to be careful about what you narrate, but he says you can go ahead and narrate their stories, and there's no problem in that. So, Abdullah. That was another person who was a Jew. Yeah, that was a Jew before he accepted Islam. That was a younger person. Yeah, that was a different person. Okay, any other questions? Okay. Yes.
This question might not be your favorite topic. You told me you like to avoid this, but I'm going to say it anyway.
It's just about Hallaj, because that's definitely not my favorite topic. Okay, go ahead.
You said that in the Jewish scripture it said that there was going to be a prophet who was going to come, right? And you asked this friend, modern day rabbi, and he said that, yeah, we believe the prophet's still coming
No, it's referring to the Prophet, peace be upon him. It's not referring to Dajjal. So just the fact that they didn't accept him, right, because of, they believe that he has to be from their own line. What they've done is they've reinterpreted this and saying from their brothers doesn't mean from the other side. It means he has to be a Jew as well. So he's going to come from the Jewish bloodline. So their understanding has been skewed. Yeah. Yeah.
There's another couple verses in the Bible that potentially refer to the Prophet. And when I was at Survey, they used to say these verses were referring to the Holy Ghost.
Yeah. That's what they say. They say, the Christians, they say these verses refer to the Holy Ghost. So if you ask the Jews, they say, no, we're waiting for a prophet. If you ask the Christians, they say, no, the prophet already came. And they say, who was this person? They say, it was Jesus. So then you say, okay, well, if this is Jesus, there's another verse that shows this could not be Jesus. So no, that was the Holy Spirit then. So, okay. So, yeah. They have their explanation. But I have my, when you just compare the two explanations, one is clearer than the other. So I have a lecture on this called Jesus, Prophet or God. You can download it. It was a debate with a Baptist pastor. And all that evidence is brought in there. It's on my website. No one recorded it except myself. So, the MSA was supposed to, they did record it, they just never edited it, and they never uploaded it anywhere. So it's typical of many MSAs, unfortunately. We're trying to. In fact, the mayor of Yorba Linda, since someone brought up Yorba Linda recently, the mayor of Yorba Linda is actually organizing a debate with the Christians for us. It's really interesting. Probably in Yorba Linda. Maybe. Huh? Topic would be, I think it's going to be Jesus, Prophet, or God. Yeah. And we have another debate coming up in May as well, in Walnut, with the church in Walnut, same topic. But harsh opponent. Yeah, I'm doing it. Sam Shimon. You guys have not heard of him, but he's a tough guy, let's just say that. In the sense that he's a very aggressive guy. So, inshallah it goes well. All right, do we need a break? No? Okay. There goes my excuse to eat some of my dinner. All right, Muhammad ibn Maslama. No, let's do one more, inshallah. There's going to be a lot of discussion maybe about Muhammad ibn Maslama. Yeah or no? Yalla, let's do one more, inshallah. So we're summarizing some of these stories because what you've noticed near the end is he adds a lot of commentary about the details of the Battle of the Trench, the details of Battle of Yamama, which we've covered all of this before. So we're going to cut some of that and we're going to shorten the class. And everyone's going to be happy, especially Sister Cheryl. She can beat the freeway, inshallah. So, Muhammad ibn Maslama, he was one of the early Yathribites to accept Islam. It's said that he was not an Arab. He's probably, dark complexion, maybe black or something like that. We don't know his exact background. But he's one of the people who accepted Islam quite early. He was paired in brotherhood. And when they did the pact of brotherhood, he was paired with Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah. Right, so Abu Ubaidah was nicknamed what? Amin. So he was known for his trustworthiness among the people. So it shows you that whenever the Prophet would pair someone with another person, they had similar characteristics. So it tells you something about Muhammad ibn Maslama and what type of person he'll be. So he's a person who's very loyal, very honorable. So he was put in charge by the Prophet of patrolling the Muslim camp with 50 men right before the Battle of Uhud. So when they went out for the Battle of Uhud, some enemies are getting prepared to battle them. So what's going to happen is you have to make sure someone is on watch. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, put 50 men on watch at nighttime just in case the enemy tries to attack. And who did they put in charge? Muhammad ibn Maslama, which shows you the importance of his status. This is a person who holds some weight with the Prophet, peace be upon him. Now, he was commissioned to assassinate Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf. Right? And Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf was a wealthy businessman. He was a Jew, He was a wealthy businessman and he was a poet. He had an Arab father and he had a Jewish mother. So he was one of the important people in the tribe of Banu Nadir. So we had already talked about the Banu Nadir and who the Nadir people are and all of that. So what happened was, why is Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf being singled out and all of that? Whereas you find most people were not singled out by the Prophet like this. So why was he singled out? This is really, really important to understand in history. Because if you don't understand it, you will somehow try to equate this with some type of drone targeted killing or some type of, you can just go and assassinate any random person. And there have been people who take a story like this and believe that you can just take the Islamic law or whatever into your own hands, and anyone who says anything against the Prophet, they're going to go ahead and just get rid of them. There's a mistake in understanding is that he was a poet, and one of the things he used to do was he would make poetry against the Prophet, against the Muslims, and even against the Muslim women, very vulgar and disgusting poetry. Right? So if you think about some of the propaganda that's out there, like even against Islam and against Muslims and all of that, this took it to a completely different level. There are some who are really, really low down and dirty. They would say things about, Muslim women are like this and they're like that and all of that. So this is one of those guys who said really, really bad stuff. But that's not the reason why he was targeted. Right? He's not targeted for his poetry. There's something else that he did, which is why the Prophet, peace be upon him, wanted to get rid of this guy. And that's what people kind of neglect. And it's very important to understand this. So what happened was, he was a person, number one, he violated the treaty with the Muslims. So when the Prophet, peace be upon him, came to Medina, one of the first things he did was he made a treaty with the Jews and with all the people surrounding Medina. So they had a treaty that we're going to be together and we're going to live in harmony and we're going to, not try and team up against one another and all of that. So number one, he violated the treaty. Then he actually went to Mecca and he incited the Quraysh to actually go and attack Medina. So he's one of the people who was instigating attacks against the Prophet, peace be upon him, and against the Muslims. So this is intelligence that the Prophet received himself and that he confirmed. So there's a fact that he actually was an insider, not just an insider like he's writing something or doing poetry. He actually was the one who was convincing them and saying, you need to go and attack and this is the way you should do it and all of that. So that, it's like a mafia boss, right? Who doesn't kill or attack people himself. What do? Mafia, but they don't like to get their hands bloody. So what do? They always hire somebody else. They hire hitmen and all of that. Does that mean that they're innocent of the crime? No. They're the ones who are committing the crime itself. So that's kind of what's happening with Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf. And Muhammad ibn Maslama was one of the people who took a team and they got rid of Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf because of the inciting that he was doing against the Muslims. So this is something that we need to understand within its proper context. One, it was the Prophet. Two, he had proper information, which is not going to be wrong, about how, what this man is really doing and what danger he actually possesses and poses to the Muslim community and what he's been instigating, right? And three, you can kind of analyze the motives of this man and what he was doing and how he violated the treaty and all of that to kind of understand why something like this happened to him, whereas it didn't happen to anybody else. So it's not a general rule. It's actually an exception to the rule because of what he's done. Right? So this is Muhammad ibn Maslama. He's remembered for undertaking this mission, which was actually very dangerous for himself, but he undertook it anyways because the Prophet asked him to. Muhammad ibn Maslama, he was left behind during the the expedition of Tabuk. Right? Do you remember how did the battle of Tabuk go? There was no battle, exactly. So, expedition of Tabuk, he left Muhammad ibn Maslama and he left Ali ibn Abi Talib in the city of Medina in case somebody goes and attacks the city. So this is something that we didn't cover in the previous class. So whenever we covered it, we just covered like the major events. So think about this. Whenever we said the Prophet is going on the Tabuk expedition and all these companions got together, how many companions? Huh? To Tabuk, yeah. which was like, how many soldiers did they have approximately? 300. Way more than as Badr. 30,000. No, that was a different battle you're talking about. The Mu'tah. Yeah. So 30,000 people went out. This is the one where it's long expedition. Only the hypocrites mainly remained behind, and to sincere Muslims. So you have to, when you're reading, the reflection I want to give you is, when you're reading the life of the Prophet, right? Don't just think that he went out and all the Muslims just left Medina and they're all the way in the northern of Arabia. What's going to happen to all the people who are in Medina? He didn't just leave it like open. Anyone can just go and attack, some little tribe can come. So he used to take care of all of these things, but we usually don't reflect upon these small details because it's assumed. But of course, some people may not assume it. So it's good to know. So these are things you have to keep in mind. He was always wary and always watching out. So he left the two of them in Medina, which shows you the status of Muhammad ibn Maslama, because he had a very important task. And Ali also, it shows you Ali's status among the Muslims and how much the Prophet put his trust in both of these people. All right, so later on, after the Prophet, peace be upon him, when Umar was the Khalifa, he actually sent him to Egypt in order to help distribute the wealth of the land in Egypt. So when he arrived, Amr ibn al-As was the governor of Egypt. So when Muhammad ibn Maslama came, imagine, this is where wealth started spreading across, the Muslim, empire, especially in places like Egypt, which is very wealthy and there's a lot of money there. So what happened is that Amr ibn al-As, he comes with some really fancy food and all of that. Muhammad ibn Maslama doesn't want to eat his food. So what does he do? He's like, you know what, I don't need your food. He takes out his own bread, puts some salt on it, and he starts eating his own food. So Amr ibn al-As is obviously not happy, and he's like, did Umar tell you not to eat my food? He said, no, he didn't tell me not to eat your food, and he didn't tell me to eat your food. So therefore, I'm not going to eat your food. So why would he do something like this? He's trying to be tough, and he's trying to remind Amr that there's a simplicity in Islam. And we're becoming very luxurious, and we're becoming, accustomed to all these things. I'm happy with my own little bread, and I'm going to remind you that this is the way it should be, and this is the way Umar is. In Medina, you're far away from Umar because you're in Egypt. But Umar is still imposing on his governors what is the criteria for you to be a governor in terms of your dress? You remember that? Outside of that, you cannot have more than 2 garments if you're going to be working under Umar in a status of leadership. If you do, you're extravagant, and therefore you're not going to have this opportunity. So very, very strict. Can you imagine if we applied that to the politicians of today? It'd be very, very difficult. Right? So this is the way Umar was, and Muhammad ibn Maslama was the same way. Now here's the interesting thing. He was a powerful warrior. He had a lot of strength. He did a lot of things. But when the civil war among the Muslims broke out, he broke his sword and he refused to participate on either side. And he said, I will not join either side in this. And he remained constant in that, where he did not participate in any of the battles, neither on the side of Ali nor on the side of Muawiyah. So this is something where we had reflected upon this in the Islamic law, Islamic history too, about some companions did not participate. He was one of them. Another prominent one who did not participate was Abdullah ibn Umar, right? So Abdullah ibn Umar was another one of them. And Muhammad ibn Maslama died in 46 age. So he lived quite a while. Any questions on this? Yes. Yes.
Didn't you say in that part that at that point there was no option of staying, having a neutral position? I mean, your point was that at that time people had to choose either the camp of Muawiyah or Ali, or Aisha or Ali.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not looked up to. I mean, the people who did not choose either side was not looked up to. They were not.
Right. Right. So that's the thing. So the question is this a noble stance that he did not take a stance? So that's what we had discussed. And I remember I said, to be honest, it's very hard to say. Most scholars say, yeah, he should have taken a stance with Ali. But it's hard to decide which one was the right one and the best one and all of that. So just leave it up to Allah. You're saying, why is it being presented as a noble? Yeah. It's it's still, look, you have to appreciate the sincerity of Abdullah ibn Umar and Muhammad ibn Muslim for not participating in the battle, because they were confused and they weren't sure what to do and whether with this side or that side or whatever. So you respect their sincerity, at least, even if their decision was not the wisest decision. That's a great question. I've asked myself that question a lot. So did Umar have the same criteria of the two garments? I mean, that was the general rule of Umar. So I don't know if he fulfilled the criteria or he didn't fulfill the criteria. He was supposed to, but who knows? Allahu alam. I mean, yes.
This is regarding the battle of Muta. Did they win the battle or they just did a tactical withdrawal?
So who remembers Battle of Mu'tah? Did they win or was it a tactical withdrawal? Okay. What did CIS say? What did we say? Mu'tah, Battle of Mu'tah. Tactical withdrawal, or did they actually win? Yeah, they salvaged a victory. They ended it before, so tactical withdrawal. Yeah, so it was pretty much a tactical withdrawal. Right. Yeah, but it's not full victory. Yeah. It was a good strategic move, right? But victory would have been that you didn't lose to the Romans, but technically they had to leave. So yeah, so, I mean, from that perspective, it was a good move. But victory depends on how you define victory, right? So yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Should we take a break? Let's take a break, inshallah. 9 o'clock, so we'll come back at 9:10. 10-minute break, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. First time in a gathering? Yeah. First time in a gathering is a requirement. If you don't intentionally, and there's no other reason for you not doing it, then yeah. Well, here's the thing. There's a bunch of proofs about being honest in Islam, right? So he has to show proof that Muslims are lying. The burden of proof is actually on him. Yeah. Did you get my text message about the program? Sure Council program? Are you thinking about that? Think about it. Inshallah.
I'm sure you've heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yes.
Did you know that they're on display locally?
What?
I'll see if I can find the information. They're limited time.
In LA?
I think so.
I'm gonna find out about it. Let me know about that.
Yeah, I heard it on the news.
For how long?
Probably a limited time. I don't know.
We should go see. There's a Jerusalem 3D movie coming out. I just got tickets to it.
Oh my God.
No, no, real video. We went into Jerusalem. They with helicopters and everything. They got permission. They filmed it. It's gonna be at the the USC complex, the museum, science museum, and all that. It's gonna be in the IMAX 3D. 600, Tea Party people came and all that. There was no Yorba Linda Police Department at the time. It was Brea Police Department. So he's like, I never even heard about the incident. So you're gonna be getting a video from me. You need to watch that.
For sure. How does he seem? Does he seem like somebody who?
No, it seems him and his deputy, lieutenant and deputy, they're both Asian, Oriental. So
Don't use that word.
Asian,
Asian.
right? Asian, yeah, right. The deputy is Vietnamese, and the other one I can't tell what he was. I know Vietnamese very well because I grew up with them.
Yeah.
But what Oriental is not the right word to use at all.
It's very derogatory.
Is it really? We don't know these cultures. I need cultural sensitivities. But Asian
Asian.
in the UK has a completely different meaning.
Is that right?
Yeah, Asian means Pakistani or Indian
Oh,
only.
okay.
So that's why I get confused between
But just
continents.
like Orientalism is
Yeah, that's another thing.
same.
Far East Asian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Inshallah.
Alhamdulillah. So hopefully
You
it's.
saw Harun's,
Yeah, I did. I'm gonna ask him to come. Does he do the presentation himself?
yeah, well, usually someone from the Civil Rights Department does it, but I think he does it too. In the olden days, back before we had all the departments, I used to go along
Oh, really?
and, speak a little bit from a Muslim
Yeah, that's good.
And I have law enforcement officers that were in my family, so I can disarm them right away. Let them know that I understood.
If you want to come, let me know.
No.
Okay.
I'm happy not to do that.
Yeah. I want to make sure that we have some proper dawah focus built into it. So
But there is very specific way to do it that's accepted. Just like when you go speak at a school, you have to you're certain. But we have an ongoing diversity training through CARE that we do at all the police departments and all the. So he has a program that you can use and it'll be nice for you to be there because we do it from Islam 101 perspective, whereas you have a more scholarly response to it. So. But if you wanted Harun to come along, I'd be happy to. It's up to you.
maybe the Anaheim one.
Huh?
Maybe the Anaheim one.
Yeah.
We're organizing that too.
I'm just wondering what is, I have two minutes. So what is the last day to, that the classes will become $70?
Tomorrow or something, wasn't it?
That's tomorrow?
I think so. Or there was an email that was sent. Did you get the email? It was sent out to. Are you not on a mailing list?
I don't know, I think, because I was on my old email, but now I have a new email.
I would say to be on the safe side, register tomorrow. Yeah, latest tomorrow. Inshallah.
Inshallah. And then also, if you can find me that thing about if you don't convert to Islam, then you have to pay the tax. Because I really don't know.
Oh yeah. Send me an email. Send me an email. I'll get you more information. Inshallah. Yes.
Is it an authentic narration to say that, I think it's from the Prophet, but I'm not certain who can tell me, that if you want to be a certain way, like, so for example, be generous, or be humble, or be brave, you have to pretend to be that, and not return to that? Is that authentic narration?
I'm not aware of it.
Not aware of that?
Dinner. Oh, what did you do, my bad?
My bad. It's been a long day, man.
How's Kev? You have your own desk? You have your own desk? Cubicle or?
It's like an office. I share an office with Zainab.
You know?
With Zainab.
Mm.
But then she has to do Right now I'm in the office a lot, but once I actually start doing projects, I'm gonna be going out.
You're working under her? Or?
She helps me. I have another supervisor. No, Mustafa Mahmoud, brother of Abdul Bakur from Islamic Review. Chef Fakir always stops by.
Always stops by?
Not always, but like I've seen him like 2 or 3 times already.
Really?
Yeah. Some today. You're chilling with the chief of police?
No. son was a lot older. I have to check.
So, I mean, they're the leaders of the young men, or the young children in general, right? So, I mean, if everyone's the same age in general, how come they can be the leaders? I don't understand. They don't look 33 years old, right? In general?
Not necessarily age-wise, but they'll look that way.
What do you mean? Like maturity level?
In terms of when they practiced most of their Islam and their dedication, they're going to be like you.
I don't understand.
I'll explain to you later, John.
Do you know Muhammad Aqil al-Sari?
He's my teacher.
Oh, really?
Came to France all the time.
Yes, thanks.
He's awesome, man.
I just want to send you small thing to never saw sin. I don't know if you know his whole, I guess his whole, and his whole
Yeah, I'll take it.
So is this made out of ILC?
IOC, yeah. So,
in the khutbah, whenever he mentions the name of the Prophet Sallallahu he always say Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He will put his down and he says Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I don't know. So subhanAllah, small thing that he wants.
he's mashallah, he's amazing, man. I love him, man.
So mashallah,
I tell you, the guy's like, he's a maktaba, man. When he mentioned,
he wrote the Professor of Sierra
I know. He wrote books on Andalus. You know what his profession is? He's a pilot. You know him personally?
He's not gonna remember me, but yeah.
Doesn't he look like an African American with his basketball shoes on?
He wears
He wears basketball shoes
sneakers. That's the problem.
all the time. He wears.
Why is it funny that he's a pilot?
Hmm?
Why is it funny that he's a pilot?
No, it's funny that our culture, you don't wear sneakers in your show.
Sons.
Yeah, I mean, or like suit shoes.
He's a sheikh. He's a doctor. He's a sheikh, PhD in Islamic history, and he's a pilot. It's just weird, man. So,
He's not a commercial pilot.
he's what?
He's not a commercial pilot.
Yeah,
That's
commercial pilot.
that's his
Second job.
that's his first job.
That's his first job, and then second job is scholar.
Yes, subhanAllah, this man, but then very humble man.
Very humble, man.
He doesn't get angry. I mean, he gets angry, but he doesn't like.
He can get it. He fought with a lot of people in France. A lot of my shuyukh, because they have fiqh al-aqaliyat. He's against fiqh al-aqaliyat.
He went to he's
Very
his
against.
opinions are more like Salafi.
Yeah.
People think, he went to Tunis after the revolution, and people were some of those crazy Wahhabi or no, I mean Jahil, whatever. They're like yelling at him. He's like, okay, I'll take all your questions afterward. But then he was saying stuff, and he went to him, especially one of them. Like, you guys seems that you don't. That was like right after the revolution. Like, you guys seems like you liked it back in the day, the Ali and the Qutayba, when you guys didn't even have the chance to say anything. You wanted to come back those days?
No, he's one of my favorite teachers, man.
So do you know?
Any book,
Do you know?
we ask him a book, he'll tell us the full title of the book, full name of the author, birth date, death date. Amazing, man.
He said that he wasn't a pilot. He told us this. He wouldn't be able to write all these books because
He wouldn't have time, you know. After you take off in a plane, yeah. I told you. I was saying in a nice way he's aggressive, but I meant he's crazy. Yeah, I know. Bismillah. is how informal our classes are. He is wild. So we had scheduled a debate before and he canceled on me. Most long story. All right. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. So Nu'aym ibn Mas'ud. Nu'aym was from Najd, again the same area we've been talking about. And he's one of those people who spent a lot of time in Yathrib with the Jews in particular because he used to like music. So again, remember, with music comes drinking. And with drinking comes women. So he used to like parties, basically. He used to like music and he used to like parties. So he used to go to Yathrib a lot because the Jews were actually known for their songs and probably for their parties as well. So he developed a good relationship with the Jews of Medina, even though he himself is from the area of Najd, which is quite far away. So when Islam came, he became an opponent of Islam. And you can imagine one of the reasons why he didn't want to be a Muslim. Somebody who's living their life for pleasure and pursuits and enjoying themselves and just parties and all of that, they don't want to change their life because they don't want to live by a disciplined code. So he did not want to change, and he ended up actually participating in the Battle of the Trench against the Muslims. So he was actually on the side, allied up with the Quraysh, allied with the other Jewish tribes, attacking the city of Medina. So during the Battle of the Trench, near the end, remember that Banu Qurayza, they actually broke their peace treaty with the Muslims, or they broke the treaty with the Muslims, and that was the most dangerous, treachery, because why? What made the Qurayza more dangerous than the other tribes who were attacking the city? They were within the city, exactly. They were within the trench, so that's extremely dangerous, right? So what happened is that Nu'aym was one of those people who was thinking during this battle, what am I doing here? Like, what am I fighting for? Right? I'm putting my life on the line, and I'm fighting people who, like, what have they done exactly? So he had the inner struggle with himself, and he started thinking about it, and he said, you know what? This doesn't even make any sense. The Muslims seem like they're true. The Prophet, peace be upon him, seems like he's a real prophet. So he changed his mind. In the middle of the battle, he changed his mind. And this is a time where, normally you would think about changing your mind when you're in a weaker position. They're not in a weaker position right now. When the Banu Qurayza defected, now you have the allies surrounding Medina, and you have an inside Jewish tribe which defected. This is a great opportunity for the Quraysh to attack and do all of these things. But Nu'aym is one of the people who changed during this time when he was in a position of power, in terms of his side being in a position of authority. So he decided to declare his Shahada and accept Islam. So he slipped into Medina, and when he got into Medina, he met the Prophet and he declared his Islam in front of the Prophet. So once he declared his Islam, he announced to the Prophet, he said, my people don't know that I've accepted Islam. I'm just telling you, nobody else knows that I've become a Muslim yet. So what do you want me to do? So now the situation is dire. So the Prophet, peace upon him, he said, look, what I want you to do is don't tell anyone that you become a Muslim, and go and try and figure out some way to get this army off our back. They're surrounding our city. There's too many people. Now the Qurayza have defected as well. They're going to attack us. So somehow do something that you need to do in order to get these people away. So he figures out an idea. He goes to the Quraysh, or he goes to the Qurayza first. And remember, he has a special connection with them. So he goes to them and he says, you know what? He thinks of this strategy. He says the Quraysh and the Ghatfan tribe, the tribes from Najd, he said, they live far away from Medina. And he said, you people, you live inside Medina. So if we're successful in defeating the Muslims, then yeah, there's no problem. But if we fail, the Quraysh go back to Mecca, the Ghatfan go back to Najd, and you guys stay here and you have to deal with the Muslims. So you guys have the most to lose, and you're in the most dangerous position. And they're thinking about it, yeah, that's true. But they wouldn't betray us, right? He says, what makes you think that they wouldn't betray you? All right, so they started thinking about it, and he said, so what do you advise us to do? He said, look, my advice is, you guys know me. I used to party with you all the time. Right? You know me. My advice to you is take some noble people from their tribes, each tribe, and keep them as like a ransom, so that they wouldn't, they have to keep on fighting till the death. They can't just run away and retreat. Because if you have some of their noble people, they can't just leave their people behind, because that's against Arab customs and against nobility. So they said, that's a great idea. We're gonna do that. We're gonna get some of their noble people so that they make sure to stick around. Then Nu'aym, he goes to the Quraysh. He tells the Quraysh, he says, you know what? This Qurayza tribe, they defected against the Muslims, but you know what? I have intelligence, inside information, that they sent a letter to the Prophet, peace be upon him, saying that we made a mistake. We don't want to ally with the Quraysh and the Ghatfan, so we actually want to ally with you, and we're really sorry for breaking our treaty, but we want a treaty again. And in order, as a sign of goodwill, we're going to get some of the noble people from Quraysh and Ghatfan and hand them over to you as prisoners. So then the Quraysh is like, they wouldn't do something like that. He's like, trust me, I have very, very good information, but if you don't believe me, why don't you go and ask them what they think about the treaty and the truce and everything. So they're all prepared. He told Ghatfan the same thing. So Abu Sufyan, he sends, a messenger, he sends his own son to go and check. He says, hey, you guys are, he sends him to the Qurayza tribe, Jewish tribe. You guys are down, right? You guys are going to fight the Prophet and you're going to fight the Muslims with us. You're 100% with us. He said, actually, we've had a little bit change of heart. We want you to send some of your noble people over and to ensure that, you're going to stay dedicated to the cause. So this was his plan in the first place. So now imagine what the Quraysh are thinking. The Quraysh are thinking, if we send some of our people, he's going to send them over to the Prophet. So this is a major problem. So he would manage to create discord between these two groups. And this was needed because they were attacking them. They were going to destroy the entire city. So with his strategy, you find that there was discord sowed between the allies. And they started fighting amongst each other and started suspecting one another. And then right after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a strong, violent wind that started uprooting their tents, and it was freezing cold. And the 1 month long siege was lifted after that. So he played a very, very important role in actually removing the allies who were surrounding Medina from being attacked. So a very, very important mission that he performed. And that was like right after he accepted Islam. In fact, he accepted Islam in the middle of the battle, which is not normal at all. But this shows you his sincerity. So during the liberation of Mecca, Nu'aym was the one who was carrying the banner of the people of Ghatfan when they were entering into Mecca during the conquest of Mecca. Now what is significant about that? The tribe of Ghatfan was the one who was attacking Medina during the Battle of the Trench. And you find how many years later? Conquest of Mecca? 3 years later. 3 years later you find tribe of Ghatfan with him carrying the flag, and you have a group of people from Ghatfan coming as Muslims into Mecca. So you see how things had changed, how the circumstances and the situation had changed. So this is one incident that we find from the life of Nu'aym. Any questions about him? Yes. No, it wasn't Muawiyah. It wasn't Yazid either. They mentioned who it was, right? I don't know. I don't remember who. I think it mentioned his name, but it wasn't relevant, so I just skipped it out. Yeah. That's the beauty of CIS. See, things which are not relevant, we just skip them. People who are curious, they can go back to the book. That's the general principle. Yeah.
Did the Banu Qurayza inform the Prophet when they broke the treaty?
I mean, it's during the battle, it's not difficult to figure out that someone has broken the treaty, because you have people you have spies and you have informants and everything, so they found out. It wasn't tough. And in fact, it wouldn't be surprising if the Quraysh actually announced to them that we got the Qurayza on our side as well, because that just adds more pressure. You're gonna lose. If you don't surrender, we're gonna kill all of you. because now we even got someone on the inside. So it wouldn't be surprising if they actually told the Muslims as well. Okay, Abbad ibn Bishr, and then we're done for the night. So Abbad was one of the people who accepted Islam in Yathrib prior to the Prophet's migration, which means that he received the message of Islam through who? Mus'ab ibn Umair. Right? So once the Prophet, peace upon him, one time he passed by Abbad and he heard him reciting Quran and praying, and he commended his recitation and his prayer, and he made a special prayer for him. So Abbad is such a beautiful prayer and everything. May Allah reward him greatly. So it shows you the way that the Prophet would deal with his companions, and it shows you the greatness of Abbad himself. Now after the siege of Nadir, so the Banu Nadir, we covered this in the past. The Prophet, peace be upon him, received news of an attack that's going to come from the people of Najd. So we're talking about this period of history now. So what did the Prophet do? He set out with 400 men to go and intercept them, so that before they can attack Medina, they need to find them. So when they reached the area where they thought that the attack was going to come from, the people of that city went, and all the fighting men and the soldiers, they went into the mountains to hide. And they left like the women and the children in the city, and everyone was kind of hiding in the mountains, ready to engage in kind of like what's that warfare called? Guerrilla warfare. Yeah. So they engage in some type of guerrilla warfare. It's more tactical, so they can go ahead and do that. So what happened was, the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the Muslims, they set camp, and they were trying to figure out what's going to happen. They didn't know if they're going to be attacked. They didn't know what's going to happen from the people of Najd. Is another army going to come? So the Prophet assigned Abbad ibn Bishr and Ammar ibn Yasir to be the two people who stay up at night watching and patrolling and making sure, in case anything happens, you need to wake up the Muslim army, otherwise there's going to be an attack. So they get together, and Abbad and Ammar, they decide who wants to have first shift and who wants to have second shift. You only need one person awake, because they were at a place where the army could only enter from a certain region, so they would know that they're coming. So Abbad decided he's going to take the first shift. Ammar is going to be sleeping during the first shift. So he starts thinking, he said, it's nighttime, it's quiet, it doesn't look like anyone's around, so let me just start praying. So he decides that he goes into salah. He starts praying and he starts reciting Surah Kahf, because he loves the surah and something that he had memorized. So he starts reciting, and there was actually a person on the mountain, and he shot an arrow at him. So he's hit by an arrow. He kept on reciting. The guy shoots another arrow, and he keeps on reciting the Quran, just removes the arrow and just keeps on going. He got hit by the third arrow, and that's when he decided, it's time to get out of salah. I need to wake up Ammar. And then after Ammar woke up, he came and told him, he said, why didn't you wake me up earlier if you've been hit by an arrow? He said, I didn't want to interrupt my recitation of the Quran. This was such a beautiful surah, I didn't want to stop it at that point in time. So they woke up, and obviously they alerted the army, and the army found out that we need to be prepared in case attack comes. Now the key here is, can you imagine somebody being shot by an arrow and continuing their prayer? See, just think about this. Ask yourself this question, and I'm asking myself the question. If a fly just comes and starts going around you, people start twitching. It keeps on landing on you, and you keep on bothering. I can't take this anymore. Or a mosquito is kind of flying around or something like that. This guy's being shot by arrows. Right? This shows you the concentration, the humility that the companions had, how prayer transformed them completely. There was one companion, he needed his leg to be amputated. His leg needed to be cut off because it was, infected all over the place, so they needed to cut it off. So before they cut it off, what did he say? He said, you know what? Let me go into prayer first. And when you see I'm fully involved in prayer, I'm engrossed in my prayer completely, then go ahead and cut off the leg. I'm not even going to notice what happened. And they did that. They cut off the leg while he was in prayer. He didn't even notice that it happened. They cauterized everything because he went so deep into prayer. This is the ideal that we should strive for. It may take an entire lifetime to achieve. We may not achieve it, but we may hopefully get somewhat close to it, at least sometimes in our life. This is the ideal that we need to get to. So this is the story of Abbad ibn Bishr that we know. One of the most things, famous things that he's well known for is that this guy, and he didn't die. He died later at the Battle of Yamama. So this guy was dedicated. His prayer was so strong that he kept on, reading his prayer, because his recitation was just carrying him away into a different place. And this is the way salah should be. And the thing is, it's not that we don't have the capability to do it. Because you know how many people there are when they watch a movie that they're literally in that exact same zone. Many kids, right? You call them. I know a lot of people. You call them, hey, Ali, hey, and then he's not responding. And then after a few minutes, did you hear what I said? Oh no, were you calling me? The person was so engrossed in that movie. Imagine if we were so engrossed in salah. That's the way we should be. The same way we're engrossed in a movie, you can't pay attention to anything else. That's the way we should be when it comes to salah. So inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us that ability to reach that status. Ameen. Any questions? Abbad?
So this guy is sort of like the governor of Homs, the one we covered a couple weeks ago, because he's letting his heart and his love for Islam get in the way of his logic. Because just like the governor of Homs who walked from Homs to Medina, Umar, this guy, instead of being watchful during the night, his heart made him want to pray. So it's kind of like the same,
Well,
same type of person.
Yeah, he can still pray and be watchful. So.
I mean, you can't look around. You're not really
You don't need to look, because I told you they were in a mountain pass. So they would know that the person is coming, because they would have to pass through them. So it's okay. That's what he did.
It mentions about the Salat al-Khawf in the,
Yes.
there is first one group prays with the Prophet.
We covered it in Islamic law, I think, right? Islamic law too. We covered Salatul Khawf, the prayer when you're in battle, how you pray in battle. So we covered the different methods of doing that.
I've heard that this story attributed to different companions, like also Ali radiallahu anh, where someone gets hit by an arrow and other companions pull it out. Or is this the only?
Where did you read that that's attributed to Ali?
I've heard it from different lectures and just brothers mentioning it.
Send me the sources. I'll never come across that.
I'm not gonna. I mean, it's just like word of mouth.
So go back and retrace. Right?
Why go back and retrace when I can just ask people at CAS?
Because the Prophet peace be upon him said that if you narrate everything you hear, then you could potentially be labeled a liar. Okay, inshallah. So just check your references, and I'm just telling you, I've never heard it in the context of Ali. So check it, inshallah. All right, any other questions? Okay, don't forget CIS registration is up for next quarter, and prices are going up very soon, I think tomorrow or something like that. So you want to register, inshallah. Yeah, question. Yeah. In English, you mean? Urdu, Arabic. So the thing is, again, this is what I meant was something that you can show personal respect to the Prophet ﷺ, that is something that you do out of your own love. But if there's a greater benefit about making a flyer so that people come to his event, how would you get around that? Right? So it's not disrespect when there's a general necessity or a public benefit that's involved. So that's where we shouldn't insist and say, no, we cannot, put his name on a flyer or something like that. Because you're actually going to harm people by them not being able to get proper advertisement for the program. So we got to make sure we balance out the both harms and benefits. All right, let me get off the microphone. Inshallah, everyone's done. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.